Thinking of winning the lotto jackpot? Well, there is an easy way. Combo Play. Choose 4 numbers from 1 to 36. That's a combo 4 at a cost.
I'm not on the page yet. Good evening and welcome to this week's edition of Roundtable Talk. This evening's conversation is all about the weather and management of our very valuable resource, water, under the changing weather conditions. Going to start the ball. We have, of course, with us in studio, we have Met forecaster at the SVG Met Services, Gregory Cato, and we also have Dan Roy Ballantyne, senior engineer technician and head of water resources at the Central Water and Sewerage Authority, CWSA. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you. Okay. Pleasant good afternoon.
Good day. So the first thing I'm going to ask, what's the forecast for the weather for this year as far as St. Vincent and the Grenadines is concerned?
Okay. For the year, just
for
the year.
For the entire year. What? Yeah.
So okay, that's gonna be a very long answer.
But that's all right.
Okay. We're actually in a situation where we are moving from a diminishing El Nino, which we can get to eventually.
A diminishing El Nino.
When you're having a diminishing El Nino, you're actually gonna move into a neutral phase or a La Nina, which eventually we'll get to. El Nino is pretty much warmer waters across the eastern Pacific. When you have these kind of conditions, you have a suppressive environment over the eastern Caribbean. You get like the warm conditions that we had over last year and so forth. Possibility of fewer storms, fewer hurricanes because you have wind shear. The warm conditions that we had over last year. In addition to this, the La Nina now is pretty much the opposite, where you have a neutral phase and you have colder waters across the eastern Pacific, and you get pretty much more hurricanes. So it's pretty early to actually give an indication as to what we can expect. But when you have La Nina conditions, so at this point we can't indicate and say, okay, we're going to have this amount of storms, because we get that information in May. But we're moving towards the La Nina phase, so we can pretty much expect a lot of storms in this upcoming hurricane season. But at this point, because we're still in the dry, we're focusing on conservation of water and so forth.
Okay. What are some of the tools that you use to forecast the weather?
Okay, so first, people hear about forecasting. So I'm a forecaster. We must, of course, analyze and monitor the weather situation all the time. We must warn of hazardous phenomena. We must maintain a quality standard. This is kept by adhering to standards set by WMO, which is the world governing body when it comes to meteorology. We must also communicate this information internally, which is in the office, the jargon that we would use, as well as externally. So when I'm here with you, I may say, conditions are favorable for some showers tomorrow, but at work I would say, we're on the divergent side of an upper level trough. This is right. And of course, we must forecast. Some of the tools that we use involve we use our eyes for sure. We must look outside, see what's happening. You have to see before you even turn to the models, which give you an indication of what could happen in the next hour, the next 3 hours, the next 6 hours, the next few days. We must ensure that we see what's happening in the sky. Are the clouds building? Are they shallow? This is a good indication to let you know whether or not your is a rich pattern or whatever. We also use satellite imagery to see the clouds that are there, as well as radar, which could indicate where the rain is taking place, and of course models, as just mentioned before.
We've been having quite a bit of rain over the last several days. I imagine that these were predicted prior to that much.
I expected some moderate showers. In terms of how much, not so much the amount, right? But prior to this, if we could go back to my 72-hour outlook, I would say even 3 days before, there was evidence that I explained, well, we'll be expecting some moderate showers and across the Grenadines and so forth. And these are because we have these tools available to us. But this is something that updates every day, the 72-hour outlook that is. One product that we disseminate from the Met Office.
All right, and I think I was hearing that the showers that fell over the last 2 years, 2 days, were actually more than the rainfall for the month of February.
That's correct. So we had like 38.8 millimeters just between Monday, Tuesday, whereas for the month of February we had 27.4, right? And that's that's very interesting. And we're basically still in the month of March. However, in terms of, in case some person might be wondering, the drought situation that was quite a bit of a concern prior to coming into the dry season, it's now a concern just up to the end of March. However, it's not a concern going into May.
Okay. I think it's time for us to bring you in. I mean, let's make the link now between the weather and CWSA, the water side of it. Where do you guys come into play?
Okay, so good evening. Now, the CWSA and the Met Services have a brother-to-brother relationship in that we, at CWSA, we have a water resources department which take care of the hydrometeorological data and some climate data. We collect data throughout St. Vincent at higher elevation, and these data that is collected, we actually use them for design and planning aspect in CWSA. Now, what we do is that we actually analyze the forecast from Met Services. In fact, at our monthly meeting, supervisors meeting, I will alert the supervisors and senior management on the aspect of drought or impending storms or situation to that sort. And so we will take precautionary measures in that. Now, we have a very proactive approach at CWSA in that we interlinked our distribution system. So in dry season, we actually can supply water from one intake to another intake, all right, where those problems may occur in terms of lack of water supply. We also we have been developing a strategy to ensure that customers receive water, and by that we would have for the past 2 years or so, we would have installed a new intake at Vermont, in the Vermont Valley, to facilitate the dry season concerns. All right. At CWSA, there are few climate variables that we monitor. All right, okay. And rainfall is definitely one, and temperature. Now, the effect of rainfall, as you may know, our water supply is surface water, and so the high temperature will have a drying effect on our water supply. Extreme rainfall will also have an effect on our supply in terms of flooding, the water quality sometimes compromised, and persons will complain of brown water, what we at CWS call turbid water, all right, and that turbid water is treated. It's drinkable, but in terms of the persons drinking it will not be pleasant to them. All right, but what we do at CWS is that we ensure that all of our water treated. All right, our treatment process is actually collection, sedimentation, in some case filtration, and chlorination, and then we distribute to our customers.
Okay, is our water supply in any kind of danger at the current time?
Presently, no. 2 weeks ago, we would have had some challenge, all right, where we have 2 weeks of dry spell. In addition to that dry spell was extreme heat. So therefore, the conditions at that point, at now there are few intakes that are actually we can look at and say, well, those are problematic. All right, Montreal is one of those, Majaka and Dalloway.
Is there any reason why these particular?
Montreal, as in the 80s, there was actually the banana boom, and we would have had some encroachment to the intakes and to the upper watershed, and so there was significant damages to the upper watershed at that time. All right, and so is also Dalloway to some extent, not as extreme as Montreal, but it's really affecting us now from that so many years ago, because it takes such a long time for a tree to actually get to its maximum stage.
Okay. What separates the dry season from the wet?
Okay. This has been seen both historically and, let's say, climatologically. When I say historically, over the years, you don't hear the terms hurricanes and tropical waves across the dry season, pretty much. And it's characterized by less rainfall for the months, that is from December to May. And when I mention climatologically, the data proves actually that the total rainfall that you get in terms of these months from June to November is actually far more in terms of significance compared to the other months of the year, pretty much.
Okay. We'll take our first break, and when we come back, we want to look at some of the climate variables which affect our water resources. We can do that when we come back.
Yes.
We'll be right
Certainly.
back. Okay.
Instacash, a new terminal game from the National Lotteries Authority. It's fast, easy to play. There's no waiting for a draw, and you can win instantly. Purchase your tickets from any Lotto terminal and win lots of cash prizes. There's the game Cash Stash, available at $2, and bingo tickets for $3, where you can win on the spot. Instacash, fast, easy to play, and you can win instantly.
Welcome back. So, what are some of the climate variables which affect our water resources?
Okay, so as I mentioned previously, the rainfall, and it's both season, dry season and the wet season. And sometimes we at CWS think that we don't have a rest because it's coming out of one into another. So it's the wet season, it's high flows, turbid water, And once the turbidity levels, now at CWSA, we have technology where we can shut off the system. It's called a SCADA system, which actually shuts off the system at a certain threshold value of turbidity levels. So it manually can shut down and automatically. So once the turbidity levels reach to that point, we try not to allow it into our systems. Why? Because it actually can contaminate our systems. So we try to avoid it. And sometimes in hurricane season, people complain, so why you shut down the water so early? Why you shut down the water during the storm? And this is the reason why. Because we try to avoid cross-contamination of our water system. Once the system is contaminated, it means that we have to flush the entire system. All right, and that
entails, the flushing entails
cleaning of the tanks, cleaning of the lines.
Okay.
Once the lines are contaminated, our mission is actually to provide high quality water, and that is what we actually worked on all of the time. All right, and so in the dry season we have this. In the wet season, sorry, we have this problem. In the dry season, there's a lack of rainfall, right? And therefore we'll have to ration once there isn't enough rainfall in our intake. And we actually, as I mentioned previously, the Water Resources Department, we do stream flow measurements. So the technicians will go out on a regular basis, on a daily basis, to actually measure the flow of the water in the river. All right, I try to simplify it as much as possible.
Okay.
All right, so that they can know what exactly the discharge levels are. What we have there also is to develop what we call a rating curve. So the rating curve is the height of the river against the flow of the river. So at any time of the season, we can extrapolate it. So at X amount of height, we know what the flow is like. All right. So it gives us the idea of how much water we can take out of any particular river at that time. So that's one. Secondly, the temperature. High temperatures, as I mentioned, will actually increase the evaporation rate, increase the drying effect, and also can also add to some water quality compromisation. Also, in the wet season, it can happen. And at CWSA, we have an in-house laboratory that actually will routinely check the quality of the water, from Fancy to Richmond. So the temperature can also have we can also have some algae growth on the surface of the water because of high temperature, humidity levels. Those are conditions that can facilitate the growth of algae. Once that happens, the caretakers will actually clear it, and we at CWSA, the water quality specialists, will go in and do their bit on it. All right. And well, I mentioned evaporation and humidity. So these are four variables that we are concerned about in the climate data.
Okay. The current atmospheric conditions, we know that there's a lot of Sahara dust in the area right now. How is that affecting the water supply and the weather generally?
Okay. Well, in terms of for the weather, as we mentioned, it's in a diminishing El Nino phase, right? Again, warmer waters across the Eastern Pacific. with an El Nino phase, as aforementioned, you get situations like last year where you had excessive heat. Now, not coupled with this heat are warmer than usual sea surface temperatures. So you have a suppressive environment where you have sinking air, warm in the atmosphere. You have these sea surface temperatures extremely high. And when you have, as he explained, heat over water, you're going to have a lot of evaporation. So it means, therefore, you have a lot more water vapor in the atmosphere at higher temperatures. Now, the Saharan dust is actually, once it's in the atmosphere, it warms the atmosphere as well. So the heat, this even adds to the heat that in the atmosphere.
Yeah, well, you actually stole my point there in terms of the heat, because
yeah. But we've been having at this point, it's not something that I found that's quite common in the dry season, but we are seeing it now.
Yeah,
and it's something that we'll see more frequent during the upcoming months. So persons who are sensitive to Saharan dust concentrations, intrusion, they may want to be more mindful of having with them the necessary medication to take, because it will be a problem.
So is there a special time of the year that the Saharan dust is most
generally
prevalent?
It's around the hurricane season, because some dynamics behind that, why we get tropical waves, right? So normally heat, the wind system and ocean currents act as mechanisms to take heat from where there's surplus, like around the equator, to the poles. Now, during these months when you have our hurricane season, what you have, as you go toward the poles, the temperature should decrease because you're heading to the poles, right, where there's colder air. However, just to the northern side of Africa, where you have the Saharan desert, temperatures actually increase, which is a reverse. So what happens, you eventually get it's a temperature gradient. It sets up a jet, which is an easterly flowing jet. It's an area of strong winds, basically easterly, and to the equatorward side of that, little pulses are set up, and these pulses are what are manifested as waves. Sometimes when these waves kick off, you have the dust behind them, pretty much. But we are experiencing, that's one theory that was put forward actually, but we're not seeing the waves, but we are seeing the effect of the Saharan dust in the dry season. Quite interesting.
What is causing this? Do we know? No?
It's still yet to be studied, I would say.
Any effects on the water supply?
No, not really. There isn't any effect. But for us at CWSA, the concern is the chemical component of the dust. Our lab will actually do some monitoring in terms of quality and chemical component, but we will monitor just a limited amount of chemicals, because we do not know what's the composition of the dust, right? So in terms of the effect, there isn't any significant effect on the water supply.
Okay, we'll take a second break. When we come back, we'll talk about some of the challenges the CWSA has in managing our water supply, if any. Back in just a moment.
You can increase your chances of winning the Super 6 jackpot with a combo play. Remember, Super 6 numbers are from 1 to 28. Choose any 5 Super 6 numbers. That's a combo 5 for $69. Match any 5 of the 6 numbers and you will win the jackpot. Choose 7 Super 6 numbers for $21. Match any 6 of the 7 numbers and win the jackpot. There's more. Combo 8, where you purchase 8 Super 6 numbers for $84. Match any 6 of the 8 numbers and you will win the jackpot. There are also Combo 3 and Combo 4 Super 6 plays. Visit the NLA headquarters in Pauls Avenue or WhatsApp 495-6886 for more details. Super 6, bigger jackpots, more chances to win.
Welcome back. There's no doubt that the weather continues to change. The weather has been changing. Should we be worried about the change in weather?
Oh, we should be, I would say. In fact, there are evidence to support climate change. At this point, there are sea defenses to the northern side of the island. And this is only as a result of rising sea level rise, basically. I'm not so sure if you're familiar with the Sans Souci area where the road has been eroded. So the road has to be put further inland. So there are things that you can actually see, and this is just one example. It's not going to stop anytime soon. It's already, the level of the water has already been rising. So there's that impacts that definitely you could see. And I believe river defenses as well in the Bookament area. Yeah. So.
If I may add here that from CW perspective, we have some concern because in 2023, the wet season, that wet season was actually, for 10-year average, one of the lowest. All right, October, November is actually the wettest month of the year. And we saw something like 50% reduction in rainfall in November last year. All right, our dry seasons are more frequent. We have dry season in 2010, one in 2014, 2015. The other part of that year was actually, of 2015 was dry. And then we had 2019 dry season. From 2019 to 2023, we have reduction in rainfall. All right, and so our stream flow data indicated that at Dalloway, which is it's actually the Bookament River, that's a big stream, a big river. We saw last year in the wet season a reduction of about 32% in flow.
Okay.
All right. In addition to that, we are seeing extremities in terms of rainfall. We had the flood in Georgetown. We had the December flood. We had a flood north of the in Sandy Bay in 2016, 2017, thereabout. And so in December last year, we had also a significant amount of rain that caused a massive landslide in the Georgetown, in the upper watershed of Georgetown, which is presently affecting one of our intake, the Perseverance intake. And so at any given time, once it's rained, we have to shut down the system because of again, high turbidity or brown water levels. So climate change is real. It's here, and there has to be some level of concern. All right, and this is from a water perspective.
How much of an issue is that Perseverance situation as far as you are concerned?
The Perseverance is a massive landslide at the upper watershed, and it's I saw a picture of it, and it's going to take a long time for that to actually
be cleared.
No, it's quite it's not accessible. All right, because of the terrain, and so what we'll have to do is to allow it to run. But as I mentioned earlier, of our proactive approach, we have a project that is on stream to do some treatment on that intake. I probably mention about our mitigation measures later down, but that is part of a project under the VEEP project, and that is the volcano emergency project.
Yeah.
All right, that project entails some other aspect of it, which is also a groundwater supply for resident of Sandy Bay and Ovia, and to develop the fancy intake. All right, I can go in depth with those
Yes.
later.
You can
I
go
can.
right
Okay.
ahead.
So the perseverance intake is it's actually a full treatment that we are planning to do in terms of perhaps additional chemicals to the water that can clump the particles together, and then we do some washing effects, and then we actually treat and supply. Now, one of the things that we have to appreciate with our water supply in St. Vincent is that we have limited amount of treatment, and that is because of the quality of the water that we have. In other countries, they're adding in local terms alum to clump the particles together, and then they actually as the particles come together, they actually discard, and then they actually do the full treatment. All right, that is a possibility for that intake in Georgetown, but again, it's into its preliminary stage, and we actually have to look at the best option for that water supply. There's a well, and it's a deep well. And in that case, we call it a borehole. All right, it's actually a well under the ground that is about 30 feet at the overland, just Turuma overland area. We would have done that well in 2008, 2009 as an observation well to look at the water potentiality for that area. And the test indicated that it's quite feasible. So that intake, that groundwater intake, will be the first intake in St. Vincent where we're going to use groundwater. In comparison to
so this has been there forever?
the groundwater groundwater are actually there for forever. All right, and what we're doing also at CWSA is to do. There's a project on now, which it's an isotope hydrology that can give us dating of the groundwater and the flows of the groundwater. Okay. So we know how old the groundwater is, at that time. So the groundwater storage is there. It's actually no one tapped into it, so it's a quite huge reservoir under the ground. So we are actually using it for potable water. Now, when we compare groundwater to surface water, and we learned some lesson coming out of the volcanic eruption, our surface water was contaminated easily by the volcanic ash, because it's all exposed. Even though we might cover the tank, it means that we have to cover the river, which is difficult. All right, and so in terms of groundwater now, that is protected. All right, it's stored in the ground, so there isn't any surface contamination besides perhaps pesticides and things like that. And we actually can zone the area for farmers, so that farmers will not intrude on the groundwater reservoirs. So, and also now the fancy, we are now for the residents of Georgetown, Sandy Bay, Fancy, and Oya for the past few days would have had their water supply shut down for some time. And that is due to the heavy rainfall, which also will cause some levels of turbidity. Once we develop this this groundwater intake, and the preliminary stage is completed, it's been financed by the World Bank. and we are actually should be starting the implementation stage perhaps later this year, so that we can actually increase the quality of the water for brothers and sisters north of the Dry River.
So why did it take it so long for this particular source to be found?
Well, it's found a long time, but finances, financing a project is a project of this magnitude is pretty high. All right, because I can tell you the cost of drilling that well is almost $1 million. All right, because we don't have any drilling entity in St. Vincent, we'll have to import some drilling into St. Vincent from Trinidad, and they actually would have dug the well at that point. And it's not only that one, but we are also looking at the development of there's a well in Bookament also. During the volcanic eruption, this well in Bookament would have supplied St. Vincent well. Okay. Because we actually use that from the second day of the volcanic eruption. Right.
Great.
A wealth of information.
Yes, learned something new today. One thing though, you mentioned the use of chemicals to treat the water. What kind of chemicals do we use for that?
Okay, so we actually use chlorine. There's sodium hypochlorite. It's a small quantity though, because some people say, well, we use chlorine to scrub at Christmas time, so why are we using chlorine to disinfect the water? But we use chlorine for several reasons, and before I go to that though, what we do is we follow the WHO standard, the World Health Organization standard, and they would have recommended several chemicals to treat the water. The cheapest of it is actually chlorine, and it's effective. The quantity that we are using is very minimal, and so the personnel at the intake, when it showed that this chlorine, we actually have two types of chlorine, which is powder chlorine and the gas chlorine. The gas chlorine is more effective. And because our systems are widespread, we have to ensure that we have a good starting point chlorination, and the end point actually has chlorine. According to the WHO, the recommended amount of chlorine that we should have in the system at the end point is 0.3 parts per million of water. So it's very minimal.
Okay, we'll take a final break and we'll be right back.
Interesting. I come and look for a job in CWSA, man.
Play for. Here's your chance to win even more from the National Lotteries Authority when you play for 2 times daily. Choose 4 numbers from 0 to 9 and you can win up to $5,000 with a $1 inline bet.
Make sport and back it up too. That's right. There'll be lots of cash waiting for you.
Get your tickets Monday to Saturday for the Play for midday draw at 1:50 p.m. and the Play for night draw 9 p.m. So easy to play.
You'll win even more.
Instacash, a new terminal game from the National Lotteries Authority. It's fast, easy to play. There's no waiting for a draw, and you can win instantly. Purchase your tickets from any Lotto terminal and win lots of cash prizes. There's the game Cash Stash, available at $2, and bingo tickets for $3, where you can win on the spot. Instacash, fast, easy to play, and you can win instantly.
welcome back. So we are heading into April because we are almost, we're into March, heading into April. What can we expect weather-wise?
Sure. So in terms of temperature, we're looking above normal day and nighttime temperatures. Also, we may see some significant episodes in terms of heat stress as we transition into the heat season in April. There's also a high confidence in an increase in the sea surface temperatures as well across the Caribbean Sea and the Atlantic. And in terms of rainfall, we're expecting to see it likely to be more than usual. And drought conditions, likely just up to the end of this month, March. However, we expect them to be alleviated by the end of May.
End of May?
Yeah.
Okay. Are we confident and satisfied that we have reliable, sure, and safe supply of water under the circumstances as the seasons change and go?
Well, we have reliable source of water. Presently, the Water Resources Department is actually doing a study on another intake in the Fenton area for possible water supply. That is in its preliminary stage. What we have to understand is that a hydrological study takes just about 20 years. So it's not just going in and tap into a water supply or a river that you see running. All right, we have to know first the quantity and the quality of that intake. So I remember at some stage that someone was sharing with me that there was some other country where they have some extension of pipe because there was some water flowing, and in the matter of the other dry season, those pipes went dry because I don't think that they would have done enough study on the water supply on that intake. All right, so it takes a long time, and that is to answer a question that you asked previously, because you see, it's not everything. Every water you see running is constant. Some are seasonal. All right, and we have to avoid investing and significant amount of money into a project, and it's not sustainable. All right, so we have to look at sustainability of it. So we, as I mentioned, we would have increase our intake. We also increase our storage capacity. Presently, we have just about 47 storage tanks in St. Vincent at various storage capacity. We have from 5,000 to 750,000 gallons. Presently, we are constructing one at 20 Hill to augment the development there. All right. We also looking at, as I mentioned, groundwater, and for the Grenadines, we are actually my CEO is very firm on this, that he wants to see water supply in Grenadines.
I was going to ask about what the Grenadine situation.
So we are actually looking at a study now for groundwater for the Grenadines, using perhaps reverse osmosis, desalination process, and to ensure that the resident of Grenadines are satisfied. Now, in 2008, we did a groundwater study for Bequia and Union Island. The study indicated that the groundwater potentiality in those Grenadines islands were very low. All right. If we had a good groundwater flow on the Grenadine Islands, actually, Bequia and Union Island would have actually have water supply at this time. But because of the low flows in the groundwater, it's really not feasible to develop at this time. So we are looking at desalination for the grenadines, and again, this is a massive project. All right, in terms of costs, because reverse osmosis plant is not cheap. It's pretty expensive, and we will really have to look into
So
financing those projects.
For someone who might be listening and want to know what is reverse osmosis, can you explain to us what that is?
It's actually what it entails is actually collecting the sea water, actually filter out the salt and turn it into fresh water. All right, that is basically the concept. It entails a lot of more details, but in summary, that's what it is really. All right, and once salt is taken out, we'll have to actually take responsibility for what we call the brine, because the salt now is actually collected at a particular point, and that is what we call the waste of it. We'll have to now dispose of that, and we'll have to look at how we actually dispose of that waste from the salt plant.
Which is, it's actually salt, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so can it go back in the sea wherever it can?
It can, but there are some treatment process that we'll have to do to ensure that happens.
Okay, as we wind down
Wow.
the program, weather implications for
There are some sectors that we normally would send key messages to, particularly the water sector, of course, tourism, health, agriculture, of course, as well. These are sectors that are always impacted, and these are information that we have on our bulletin on a monthly basis. In the case of water, we would normally ask the folks at CWSA to continue to, let the public know to conserve water. We also would urge persons to report leaks, because this is an all hands on deck. We have to have an all hands on deck approach, because if you don't report the leaks, then you could have some water wastage. So to avoid that, that's something that we would ask. In terms of health, now we know that now we're approaching into our heat season. We're going to have more situations where there will be illnesses due to heat, high temperatures, right? And then again, the situation with the Saharan dust, we'll start seeing frequent episodes. So, and we are asking that the folks continue the anti-fogging, because wherever there's stagnant water, then this will lead to the proliferation of mosquitoes, breeding, and so forth. In terms of agriculture, we'd ask farmers to employ, methods that are, to ensure that they're strongly advised to take preparations for the conservation of water and irrigational practices, and to plant more resilient crops. And in terms of tourism, now we're in the season where you're having less rainfall. The folks, you can now enjoy more outgoing activities. However, they must still be mindful of the situation where we have rough seas around this time, especially in April, and you may want to plan accordingly, especially for these kind of events.
Okay, so if I can mention a challenge that we have, especially in the dry season, and it occurs in the wet season where there are areas out of water. The average consumption per person is actually 30 gallons per day. All right. Now, what we are noticing is that when we are rationing, the resident will come with a bucket, and at the end of the day, they will call and say, "Oh, there's no water." Now, 30 gallons per person, all right, will indicate that if you have a household of 4, That is 120 gallons per day that you have to collect. So we are asking our customers, the resident, to increase their storage capacity, because it will actually avoid the frequent visit of the tankers or the pickups that we use most of the time. And I think what happened is that our customers are so I sometimes say that we like a parent, we treat them too good. So they always say, well, have reliable water. But at the end of it, we have to ensure that we actually have enough storage, so that in the wet season, in the dry season, you can actually use those water, all right, and to avoid the tankers thing, to another visit to that area. The other challenge we have is actually settlement at high elevation. Settlement of high elevation, and sometimes people will come and ask, so we are going to build there, can we guarantee a constant water supply? At high elevation, you have to realize that the intake level and the tank level is at certain elevation, and our water are gravity fed. We don't have pumps, and it's gravity fed, and that is why our water cost is this minimal. It's throughout the Caribbean, we are paying the less for water. So we are avoiding pumping of water. So persons at high elevation can expect some shortage at some stage because of the elevation difference between the tanks and between and the intakes. All right, and as I mentioned, it's all gravity, so it's flowing from high elevation to low elevation. Okay, this is a challenge, and also what we're asking is person can go online and actually view your bill. You can actually take advantage of our online billing. All right, it's a new concept. And as residents, we have to able to go with the change in time.
Just like we have to deal with the change in weather patterns. Okay, that's our program for today. So glad you could join us. I'd like to thank Mr. Danroy Ballantyne of the CWRC, and of course Mr. Gregory Cato from the Met Services for joining us this evening. Join us again next week, Wednesday, for another edition of Roundtable Talk. Good evening.